I'm back, people of Earth. It's 9 p.m, 9:01 p.m. on the 3rd of June 2025. I was telling you the story about my encounter with that clairvoyant fortune teller, Anastasia. My computer chopped me off for no reason, just flipped me off. It's a genie in my computer. So anyway, I'm back to continue with my mission, which is to read to you from Man, Myth and Magic, to continue that story. I've spoken about it in another video on YouTube, so it's already up here, up on here, way back. I can't remember what I titled it. How a psychic saved my life, or words to those effects. So I won't go into the full story in every detail again because it's already up on here on my channel, spoken about at length. But the words she said to me were, I always hoped I would see you again, and literally my blood ran cold. And then my eyes moved over to my mother. Non-verbally, I was saying to her, don't say anything about it to my mother. And she looked over at my mother and saw the look on my face. And she immediately, very intelligent woman, immediately understood. I didn't want my mother to know that we knew each other. And she kind of just said, and I said, I'm happy to see you again, Anastasia, and thank you. That's all I said, thank you. I said, because of you, I am here. She nodded. She said, I'm so amazed to see you again. She said, I always wondered what happened to you, what the outcome of that was. So I just said, suffice it to say, you were accurate, exactly accurate how you described, and it wasn't pretty. She nodded. And then my mother brought into it. What's all this about? How do you know each other? I said, never mind, Mum. We met each other many years ago. I had a reading from her. Didn't give the details. So, and the reason I didn't want my mother to know that was the psychic that saved my life was after the strangulation, 3 days later, which was a Wednesday, my husband, my former husband, only knew I was still living actually in the house separately, and I was living in the rumpus room. But anyway, he brings my mother over, and she was so vicious, and I had bruising and welts across my neck, which, by the way, had I gone to the police, was sufficient evidence that I'd been strangled. Big red welts across my neck. And my mother stood there and started screaming alongside my husband. They were just both fucking drama queens. Oh, they were evil, the pair of them. They make me sick to this day. That's how evil they were. She's been dead 15 years. So, nothing has changed. I don't care if she's in the spirit world. She's still an evil piece of shit, in my opinion. So anyway, she looks at my ex-husband, Michael, and he looks at me, and they both start screaming. Oh, we wish we could have controlled you years ago, and you deserved it. Deserved it, being almost murdered by some young fucking drug-fucked gimp, am I right? Anything for $50 they could get on. $50 fucking dollars. That's what my life was worth back in 1995. I mean, it's not funny, but you kind of have to laugh. Anyway, so my mother starts screaming, yes, we should have beaten you years ago, and all this really ugly things. And I'm standing there, like, still traumatized and still kind of in shock. I said to her, why are you here, Mum? Why are you in my home? Get out. Yeah. So she mouths off with, I wish we'd beaten you years ago. I said, get out of my house. Just get the fuck out and never come here again as long as I draw breath. And my husband's like, oh, but I brought her here. And I went, well, you can take her back home, can't you? No one invited her here. And they just looked at me. So I literally pushed her out of my marital home, shut the door, and she stood in the front entrance crying like a baby, completely insightless as to what she had just done to me. Already freshly fucking wounded and victimised, she sunk the boot in. I hate people like that. I hate them with every fibre of my being. You can't even quantify how much I hate people who sink the boot in when all you've done is try to bloody get free of them and live your life. It's unbelievable, the monstrosities that they were. But anyway, what triggered that? The black obsidian crystal ball. But I am glad that I got to meet Anastasia again in that instance. It was about 7 years later. And I'm grateful that I got to say to her that I'm grateful for her literally saving my life. And her saying to me, I did worry over the years. I often wondered if I would, whatever would have become of you. She said, oh, it was that crystal clear. I could see it all playing out moment by moment as if I was there too. And that is the power of a true clairvoyant. It's like they slip in and out of the space-time continuum and they can see things in minute detail in perfect chronological order. It's astonishing. It's astonishing at times. Anyway, wherever you are, Anastasia, I don't know your surname. I know she gave up fortune telling. She got a job working as an accountant. So wherever you are, to you, my darling, is whatever angel or guardian angel came and channeled through you to me has been with me ever since, protecting my ridiculously absurd sorry ass from monsters. Not just in that instance on the 16th of January 1995, but the two attackers that came later, both men that again, those two were sexual partners. So, well, one is in the void, David Davidson, who still haunts me, trying to make amends and remedy the harm he did to me. From the spirit world, he can't do shit. Doesn't have a body, doesn't have any real influence. He can't fix shit. But, sometimes like the ghost of Mrs. Muir, I indulge him, let him communicate with me and, chat to him occasionally. Someone stepped up behind me yesterday when I was doing my YouTube reading from this book, but I don't think it was Davidson because they didn't speak, they didn't say anything. So I don't know who that entity is. But anyway, it's all good. I know that I am heavily protected and loved, if not by mortal human men, but by, ironically, male energies in the spirit world, and some of them are very, very powerful protectors indeed. And I have a angelic protection as well. And for one little woman who just struggles to get by on her own and is under constant pernicious threat, including the COVIDian madness of the last 5 years, I've had more than the average amount of protection from invisible and powerful entities, and sometimes it is a bit humbling and even scares me, to be honest. But they've never done me any wrong except failed to completely avoid certain situations which could have been avoided perhaps. My life might have been a whole lot better had I never met Michael Aarons, Terry Rosilio, David Davidson, Courtney Evans, and the others that had their little bit parts along the way. Anyway, what can I say, people of Earth? Let us continue reading and focus on the love, the light, and the magic that is gifted to us all. And turn shit to spiritual gold as I do every day. Beliefs about luck, fate, and the future are human weapons against chance, accident, and the menace of chaos which threatens the order of the universe. This introductory article paints a backcloth for future articles on fate, luck, and many methods of fortune telling. Oh, by the way, my little bow, my new little cockatiel bird that broke what was my mother's originally, beautiful carved mother of pearl with the birds. I've pretty much decided I've got to buy the accelerator, and I've got to buy the special CA glue. But I've pretty much decided I'm going to inlay the little birds into that cutlery canteen that I made a couple of years ago. Just why not add them in to that instead of turning them into earrings. I don't need any more earrings. I've got lots of lovely earrings, and I think they'll look quite lovely, carved up and inlaid into that box. Right, that's enough segues from now. Let's forge ahead, people of Earth. To die of old age is not remarkable, but when a man dies young, is it fate, ill luck, the will of God, or mere chance which has taken him before his time? Mama T, aka the Tanya, aka me, myself, and I have had 3 strangulations, but since infancy, 16 near deaths. 16 now, we're up to 16. It's a lot, people of Earth. It's a lot. But someone, capital S, wants me to be here on planet Earth, strutting my stuff, dancing when I can, living my best life, am I right? Under quite fraught and difficult circumstances at times. But I'm here for a reason, even if I don't know what that reason is, my beloved ones. In different moods we may give different answers, for we have inherited a whole set of contradictory notions. The belief that the course of our lives is decided by fate or the gods, the conviction that our own actions affect what happens to us, the suspicion that things occur largely by accident, and the persistent feeling that some people, things, or periods of time are lucky and others unlucky. That there is a tide in the affairs of men, and we must take the current when it serves or lose our ventures. The gambler's faith in a winning streak. Contradictory beliefs about fate, luck, and chance are not so strange if they are seen against the background of nature. People observed long ago that there is order in nature. The sun rises and sets. The seasons follow each other. The tides rise and fall. The stars wheel in their courses, and all men die. But people also saw disorder in nature. They saw drought, earthquakes, eclipses, unexpected and disruptive events of all kinds, and they saw that some men prosper for no apparent reason, while others fail equally unreasonably indeed. Well, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, but the Lord also gives again. It's quite astonishing how my life has been a hurdy-gurdy ride of prosperity and loss and attempted murders and disarray and sexual assaults and slanders and treachery and debasement. But when the Lord blesses me again with true friends who've been very generous to me over the years, to you, my earth angels, you know who you are. And it came up in my memory, one of them sending me a care package when I was very ill back in 2015. And over the years, not just in 2015. So I have been blessed with people who have been more than generous and kind to me, to somewhat compensate for the absolute fucking monstrosities that dogged me since I was 6 years old in my early childhood with the child sexual abuse. So, as I said, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away, the Lord often will give again. Life is long, can survive almost anything and almost anyone. But at my age now, at 60, it's getting, stretched a bit thin, the surviving business. But it's something I've always done, survived against the odds, even as a baby, so maybe that's my success. I mean, you almost have to laugh. Right. In societies directly dependent on agriculture and stock raising, it was a matter of the most immediate importance for the rain to fall and the sun to shine in due season. The ever-present enemy was a failure of order, the coming of chaos, and many ancient myths and rites, as well as all political institutions, were human weapons in the battle against chaos. But sometimes chaos came, and so men combined an uneasy awareness of chance and accident with a belief in the essential orderliness of the universe. Of the two, the belief in order has been much the more important. Human life depends on the order of nature, and without it, there would be no hope of making sense of the world. Hence, magic, philosophy, science, and the modern rise of probability theory, the subjection of chance itself to mathematical rules. The belief in order and the corresponding dislike of chance, the disinclination to allow chaos an important role in events, are the basis of ideas about luck and fate, and all methods of predicting the future, whether from the planets, from lines in the hand, from a Bible opened with your eyes shut, or from a stray sneeze in the night, depend on the belief that the universe is an ordered design and that even the most trivial and outwardly random events have a place in the design and therefore contain clues to the direction in which other events in the universe are moving. Before I continue, I will just show you the photographs and pictures. Refusal to believe in chance random events is the basis of many methods of fortune telling. Every event is part of a pattern and shows the direction in which other events in the universe are moving. The apparently random fall of playing cards above left or tarot cards below left. I can't. Ah, yes. It's not actually correct, but anyway. Is believed to indicate the future. The gambler's wheel above right and the wheel of fortune below right are both concerned with runs of luck, the ups and downs of life, in a pattern defying statistical probability. Oh, that's why I got confused. I read the wrong page first. Anyway, so here we have they're not actually playing cards per se. They're the Lenormand cards, which are perfect for fortune telling. And here we have a woman reading tarot cards. Here we have the roulette wheel. Here we have someone ascending to heaven. It's something quite there, but there's the wheel. She's holding the wheel of fortune in her hand. And here we have what looks like a hand drawing of a card there. Previous page. Mirrors and crystals are used to foresee patterns of fate. The scryer hoping to see the future in the glass. Above left, symbols of the golden sun and the horned moon. In astrology, the principal arbiters of a man's fate. Above right, a fairground palmist. She's reading his palm. I had a wonderful palmist. He was at the markets when my mother sold jewellery. His name was Harold, Englishman. And yes, he was very kind to me and made some interesting predictions which we won't go into. One of them was that I'm going to live to a very old age, which I don't believe that for one moment, but here I am at 60 against all the odds. So you never know, he might have got that bit right. Yes, and I won't say the rest because I don't want to jinx it in case that bit comes true. Oh, silly Mama T. Anyway, the design of the future. Michael Scott, astrologer to the Emperor Frederick II in the 13th century, said that sneezing twice in the night for 3 successive nights is a warning of death in the house. Long before that, the Greeks believed that when you sneezed, That meant that what you were thinking about at that moment would take place. A sneeze was an important omen because it is an expulsion of breath, which was thought to be the soul and life of man. That is why we say, "Bless you," when somebody sneezes, but all sorts of other apparently random events, from the fall of playing cards to the patterns of tea leaves left in a cup, have been and still are taken as signs, of the future, because they are part of the design of the universe. Fortune telling again involves, contradictory beliefs. The many modern believers in astrology, palmistry, and in other ways of predicting the future, which imply that the future is already mapped out ahead of us, do not usually accept that they have no power to alter their own destinies. Astrologers who claim to predict the future accurately as much as 80% of the time will go on in practically the same breath to maintain that we can assert ourselves against our stars, and that the astrologer's most important function is to help us to do so. Well, my darlings, the infernal machine. Our beliefs about fate come to us from the old pagan world, especially from the Greeks, almost untouched by Christian influence. The Greeks took it that the universe is orderly and obeys laws, a belief which runs all through Greek literature. The famous tale of Oedipus, for instance, which makes so profound an impact that Freud thought it expressed the unconscious desires of every man, can be seen as the story of a man who murders his father and sleeps with his mother because he is in the grip of a malignant and inexorable fate, an infernal machine, as Jean Cocteau called it in his play of that name, an apparatus constructed by the infernal gods for the mathematical destruction of a mortal. Or, in the hands of Sophocles, the story is used to suggest that behind the events of a man's life there is a pattern, a design, and that the design is there whatever the agonies it inflicts on us, is better than its not being there, which would mean that we lived in an intolerable chaos. This sense of a divine order is cruelly but magnificently expressed in the last lines of The Women of Trachis by Sophocles, another play in which the characters are caught in an inexorable process which carries them to their doom. In E.F. Watling's translation, you have seen strange things, the awful hand of death, new shapes of woe, uncounted sufferings, and all that you have seen is God. R.B. Onions has shown in the origin of European thought. The great importance in early Greek ideas of fate, of the notion of bonds and binding, not as a symbol but as a factual account of what was thought to happen. Fate, or the gods, bind a man with invisible cords, which are also the threads spun by the fates. Cloto, who spins the thread, Lachesis, who measures or apportions it, and the inflexible Atropos, who severs it at death. The fates, moirai in Greek, became in Latin fata, meaning things spoken, what is decreed. From the Latin came our words, fate, fae, and fairy, including the fairy who visits the cradle of a newborn child to bring him good or evil gifts, which may have been the original function of the Greek fates themselves. Before we continue, I'll just show you the photographs and drawings. Physical objects revealing the pattern of fate, human character and destiny can be divined by molosophy, the distribution of moles on the body above left, by bumps on the head measured by an early 20th century electric phrenolometer above right, and charted in a phrenological diagram facing left, by the pattern of leaves in a cup facing right. Molology, showing all the places that moles can be in a body, and I guess ascribing meanings to that. Oops. The pseudoscience of phrenology, and reading the tea leaves. We continue reading the spinners of fate. The motifs of binding and of fate spinning the thread or weaving the pattern of our lives are not confined to Greece. In Northern Europe, the Norns were the spinners of destiny. In Anglo-Saxon literature, fate is woven. And we still say of a man who is certain to do something that he is bound to do it. The idea of fate as a decree, what has been spoken, also reappears in our use of the word doom, which originally meant a decree, a judgment. Also, not confined to Greece, is the tendency to think of fate as something essentially evil, partly because the common fate of all men is death, and partly because fate is the antagonist of human freedom. Some men, like Napoleon, have felt that they were destined to greatness, and their conviction has given them strength. But more often fate is thought of in terms of misfortune. Mnemosyne of Colophon in the 7th century BC, taking a figure of speech from Homer before him, struck a note re-echoed by countless poets since. We are like the leaves of springtime which grow strong in the sun, and for a while we enjoy the flowering of youth. But the black fates stand by, and one holds in her hand the goal of bitter old age, the other that of death. At its noblest, this pessimism has been expressed in proud defiance, a refusal to be broken by fate's blows. Others have found serenity in bowing to the decrees of destiny. In the 2nd century AD, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius said that it was the characteristic of the good man to delight in and to welcome what befalls and what has been spun for him by destiny. And some 650 years earlier, in China, Confucius remarked that if the wise man achieves something, it is well. If he achieves nothing, it is also well. He recognizes destiny. Otherwise translated as nothing else matters. Is it good or is it bad? Well, I'm trying hard to achieve things at this late stage of my life, but to what end, people of Earth? Maybe I'd be better to just rest and enjoy life and take a back seat and let the young fill my shoes, step into their own powers and their own gifts and talents and hand over the reins. But wow, I'm not liking how our society is devolving since the COVID epoch, so I don't have the luxury of closing my eyes to it and remaining silent. The only weapons I have are my voice and my truth and my little bizarro YouTube videos. To the gods who know well my destiny. Fate and providence. An extreme view of fate and a total disbelief in chance is to suppose that everything we do is determined by destiny. But this picture of man as a fly in a spider's web has not appealed to many. More common is the belief that fate determines only the most important matters in a man's life, or the general direction of the path his life takes. The obvious example of a fate which awaits everyone is death, and sometimes fate is merely another word for death, as in our expressions fatality and fatal accident. Sometimes fate is thought of mainly in terms of what happens after death, as in the doctrine of some Christian thinkers that each of us is predestined to be saved or damned in the next world, regardless of our actions in this one. Fate is also commonly thought of in if-then terms. If you do this, then that will happen, not as a logical consequence of your action, but because fate has so ruled. Nowadays, we do not usually name fate itself in this connection, but we use phrases which mean the same thing. I feel in my bones that if I do this, things will go right or wrong, or something tells me, or even a little bird tells me. Often a little bird, little niggling, little twittering, gnawing at your psyche to tell you need to take action, or you need to lay low right now. Pay attention to your little bird called intuition. But sometimes, whether you obey your intuition or not, calamities happen to you. 16th of January 1995 and the other dates. I can't remember the exact dates of those attacks now. Isn't that amazing how the mind protects itself? But I remember the first date. Motherfuckers. Well, anyway. Yes. Or even a little bird tells me, which is a reminiscence of one of the principal functions of birds in folklore, to deliver warnings of the future. That fate is not something inexorably fixed in advance, but a power which may change its mind, is implied in the fear of tempting fate, of attracting the attention of an unseen power who will punish you if you presume to express optimism about your future. The doubtful morality of a power which acts in this way again recalls early Greek ideas. In the last book of the Iliad, Achilles describes how Zeus deals out good and evil fortune to men. Morality is not involved. The man who is fortunate deserves no credit, and the man who is unfortunate, no blame. It is all in the lap of the gods, which you will hear me say often. It's one of my favourite philosophical tropes. All is in the lap of the gods, babies. Sit well. Sit on it, Fonzarelli. What goes up must go down, baby boys and baby girls. You might come up again, you might not, but in the meantime, we're still spinning in a blue marble through a section of the Milky Way, going nowhere and everywhere at our own pace. It's ridiculous, isn't it, when you think about it? Kind of funny. It is all in the lap of the gods, as we should say, or on the knees of the gods, as Homer said. Spinning involved drawing the thread across the knees or the lap. It was the lack of morality of the Homeric gods that was criticised later in Greece, where some came to see fate as a moral power which punishes a man's crimes, an idea for which we and the Greeks use the term nemesis. But in Homer, evils which afflict a man are misfortunes, not punishments for sin. This is a very different view from the Indian belief that your actions decide your fate in your future lives and the endless cycle of rebirths, from which, in any case, you can escape. It also sees man's relationship to the divine in a way very different from the Jewish and Christian traditions. There is no word for love of God in Homer, and no word for God-fearing either. In Judaism and Christianity, what matters is the beneficent providence of God. The Old Testament is the record of the unfolding of God's plan for the world, a theme adopted by the Christians. Similarly, in Mohammedanism, by that they mean Islam, for the theologians at least, Kismet is the providence of Allah, the divine plan, though in popular belief, Allah behaves more like the Homeric Zeus, distributing good fortune and bad to men, from which there is no escape. Here again is the belief in a divine order, but in spite of centuries of Christian teaching, something nearer to the Homeric outlook seems deeply implanted in Western man. For many, it is not easy to feel, and perhaps it never has been, that God is working his purpose out as year succeeds to year. Patterns of luck. When a gambler calculates the odds against him, he is concerned with probability. When he is irrationally convinced that he is going to win, regardless of probability, he is concerned with luck. Luck might almost be defined as the poor man's substitute for fate. Kings, heroes, and important people who rise to great heights from which they can be dashed down have fates. Everyone else has good or bad luck. The bandy-legged Egyptian god of good luck, the dwarf Bes, has been called the poor man's god, and the Roman goddess of luck, Fortuna, was originally a rustic deity of fertility. Presumably, the fertility goddess turned into a divinity of luck because successful farming depends so heavily on factors outside the farmer's control. Luck is another human weapon against chaos and, like fate, it implies belief in an order which has nothing to do with probability, normal cause and effect, human effort, or human morality. If you get what you deserve, that is justice. If you get more or less, that is good or ill luck. But, unlike fate, luck is often thought of in a favourable light. To be lucky is to be fortunate. To be fated is generally ominous, which follows from the fact that luck operates in the short term, affecting events for a limited time only. This comes out in the very old belief in lucky and unlucky days, surviving in some people's reluctance to do anything important on a Friday, or in the belief which has lasted since Roman times that May is an unlucky month for a marriage. Well, there you go. My wedding date was the 20th of May, 1984. Well, I didn't know it was unlucky, did I? I didn't know I was marrying a dull intellect psychopath either. Found that out in very short order. Right, we mustn't dwell on that consciousness. It's a long, long time ago, and I have a wonderful life now. I really do. The last few weeks, since the little birdies came into my life, actually, I got inspired to set up my studio and improve on it and raise my jeweler's bench and buy more soldering equipment, and today more soldering supplies, and forging ahead as though I have many, many years of success ahead of me, as though I have everything handed to me on a silver platter from the gods. It's a bit of a fantasy when you think about it, but I'm working hard to achieve my little goals, and it's a nice distraction from the other abject horror that happened back in 5th of April. So there is that, people of Earth. Keep myself busy and not think about yet another disappointment or potentially evil, life-threatening entity. Just let it all fucking go, babies. Just go. Anyway, in the long run, which is the province of fate, there is misery in store for us, old age or death or both. Death is not a misery, people of Earth. It really isn't. It's the dying process that can be awful, tortured and foul and dragged out for weeks and months and years if you get Alzheimer's like my mother. An awful fucking death, that is. But death itself is a sweet, sweet release and a dance into the void. Ask me how I know. But anyway, this person writing this is clearly very fearful of death or the end of their physical body and their personality, and there is no actual death in real terms. Our personality, I believe, survives beyond our eventual decay and leaving this physical form. We take our personality with us when we go, our soul, our spirit, a large part of our personality. I mean, you've seen me communicate with David Davidson, who, although he's been dead for 9 years, his personality remains rather intact, to my astonishment actually. So until you reincarnate and they put the veil of forgetfulness over you and you reincarnate perhaps as another gender or another form, don't remember, then you might lose your personality, but in the interim you carry it with you and keep evolving and growing your personality more and more each day in the space-time continuum, people of Earth. Growing and evolving, loving, becoming beginning the begin again. Right, but those are my philosophies. I'm not imposing them on you, my YouTube audience and subscribers. You're entitled to your own thoughts about that. Don't let me influence you. That's just how I look at life and death. Primarily because I've had that many cliches with death that I know that it's not really all that much to be afraid of. It's just a transition and a stepping stone into another way of being. Right, here he writes, in the long run, which is the province of fate, there is misery in store for us, old age or death or both. But luck, which works from day to day, may have good or bad consequences. The same idea lies behind the common use of magic, especially the wearing or carrying of charms to ensure good luck. Only a magician of extraordinary powers could avoid death or the other grim gifts of fate. But anybody can try to attract fortunate influences or ward off unfortunate ones in the short run, and many still do. J.D. Rockefeller Sr. carried a lucky stone in his pocket to protect him against illness, shipwreck, and other misfortunes. Others set great store by a rabbit's foot, a lump of coal, a car mascot, or some other fortunate talisman. And the sales of lucky charms support a sizable industry. It is, in fact, a common observation that there are runs of good and bad luck, and that some people are consistently luckier than others. C.G. Jung called this synchronicity and suggested that there is a relationship between a man's psychological state and the events which are somehow attracted to him. Whatever the explanation, the belief in luck is part of the constant human determination to see a pattern in the world around us and a design in our own lives. Right, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to continue reading because the first part of this video that we got chopped off was 24 minutes long and we're 1 hour in, so I've already read for an hour and 24. Well, I guess I sometimes go on for 2 or 3 hours, but I'm just a little bit tired, people are there. I'm a little bit weary. But anyway, the next entry is Apollo. Written by David Phillips, which happens to be my dead father's name, so there's a synchronicity there. So I'll read it and then I'll finish for the evening. We'll finish with David Phillips. Dear Goddess. Apollo. The perfect embodiment of the Greek spirit, Apollo was perhaps the best loved of all the Greek gods. Through his famous oracle at Delphi, he exercised a conciliatory influence on Greek politics, and he was believed to have founded many of the Greek colonies. And I'll just show you the painting. The laurel, Daphne in Greek, was sacred to Apollo. He fell in love with the nymph Daphne, who escaped from his amorous attentions by turning into a laurel tree, as in this painting by the brothers I don't know how to pronounce that. Pollaiuolo, 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 Poly something. Pollaiuolo. Anyway, 15th century. All the Italians are just shrieking with laughter right now. I can't help it, people of Earth. 15th century National Gallery of London. But there she is. What do you do when you have a man stalking you being a bloody pest? Who's not even genuine, but just obsessed and fucking weird. Turn into a tree, grow a new leaf and turn it over, babies. Well, you know, there is a history, darlings. Apollo. Try not to choke on that. Apollo, brightest and best of the ancient Greek gods, was the god of music, archery, prophecy, healing, the care of animals and young growing creatures, and from the 5th century BCE at least, he was identified with the sun 500 years before Christ. He was the only Greek god to have specific functions in each of the domains allotted separately to the three gods of the sky: Zeus, the sea, Poseidon, and the earth, Hades. His titles bear witness to these functions. He was, for example, Apollo Asclepius, god of radiance; Embasios, favouring embarkation; and Arotrios, god of ploughing. His titles, of which well over 300 have survived in ancient authors and inscriptions on stone, show that Apollo was a god much loved by people in all walks of life. He was the inspiration of a great deal of ancient Greek painting, poetry, and music. Pardon me. More than any other figure in Greek mythology or history, he embodied the spirit of Greek civilization. In art, he was depicted as the ideal type of young, virile beauty. In historical times, Apollo was worshipped by all the Greeks. He plays a prominent part in the Homeric epics, and in the Iliad is the ally of the Trojans. In Homer, he is usually called Phoebus Apollo, bright Apollo. Other epithets associated with him refer to his deadly aim as an archer or to his silver bow. But this most typically Greek of all gods, if he did not come originally from Asia Minor, certainly incorporated many of the features of a prehistoric non-Greek deity. It is possible that the name Apollo is of Greek origin, although modern scholars are divided as to whether the root meaning of the word is strength, sheepfold, or assembly of voters. But at an early date, the original Greek god seems to have been identified with a Hittite god named Apollonius or Apollonios, and the Greeks themselves associated Apollo not only with a legendary northern people, the Hyperboreans, but also with Lycia, a country in what is now southwest Turkey. Apollo's mother's name, Leto, has often been connected by scholars with a Lycian word meaning woman. The Greeks, however, were aware of an ambiguity in the title Lykeos, Lycian, often given to Apollo. Greek poets punned, and in ancient Greek, puns had a serious, not a humorous, significance. On the associations this title could have with Apollo's fame as a slayer of wolves, Lykos being the Greek for wolf. Apollo's eastern connections partly account for an atmosphere of mystery, which was another of his aspects. In time, he accumulated many exotic titles, some of them of undoubtedly non-Greek origin, and as the god of oracles, he is known throughout the Greek world as Loxias, the ambiguous one. Apollo and his twin sister, it says Artemis, but don't they mean Artemis? Were the children of Zeus, king of the gods, and Leto, the Titaness. According to one version of the birth myth, Delos was the only land which would receive Leto, as she felt her time to give birth drawing near. Other places feared the power of the god she would give birth to. In historic times, Apollo's birth at Delos was celebrated by an important festival held in that tiny island each spring. According to the historian Herodotus, the Hyperboreans came every year with offerings which they brought all the way from their northern homeland. There was also an oracle of Apollo at Delos. Apollo at Delphi, or Delphi. Apollo's most important oracular shrine, however, was at Delphi on the Greek mainland, a place which preserves to this day much of the extraordinary religious atmosphere which it had in ancient times. The Homeric hymn of Apollo describes how the god came to this place beneath snowy Parnassus and performed, while still a child, according to some accounts, one of his greatest exploits. Nearby there was a fair stream where the prince, son of Zeus, killed with an arrow from his bow a dragoness, a fat, great, wild monster who had done much harm to men on earth and to their long-shanked flocks, for she was a blood-reeking bane. Later tradition embroidered the story, and the female dragon became a male snake, a python, from which derived Apollo's title of Pythian, often accorded him in his connection with the oracle at Delphi. It is often said, and the belief was already prevalent in antiquity, that the dragon or snake represented an earlier earth cult which was ousted by Apollo. But there is nothing in this original account in the Homeric hymn to suggest that the dragoness was in any way oracular or the guardian of an oracle, and the theory seems to spring from a later interpretation of what, in the first place, was a simple dragon story of a type common in Greece and elsewhere. The ruins of Apollo's temple and the small omphalos or navel stone, which the Greeks regarded as marking the true centre of the earth, can still be seen. Apollo was sometimes shown in Greek art as sitting on the stone. The oracle was run in historical times by priests who interpreted the more or less incoherent mutterings of the Pythia, a middle-aged woman dressed by convention as a maiden, who sat on a tripod, inhaling the fumes of barley, hemp, and chopped bay leaves burned over an oil flame. She was believed to be in direct communication with the god. For over 1,000 years, the oracle was regularly consulted by both Greeks and Romans, and by Orientals as well, who were anxious to know the divine purpose in relation to future events. The oracle's replies were almost always obscure or ambiguous, and often wrong. But Socrates was a firm believer, perhaps because Apollo had declared him to be the wisest of all men. The oracle was closed for 3 months in winter, and during this time Apollo was supposed to be absent, visiting his special people, the Hyperboreans, who danced, sang, and feasted in his honour. It was through the oracle at Delphi that Apollo exercised his chief political influence in the Greek world, which can be summed up as moderate, conciliatory, and conservative. His advice was considered especially valuable by anyone intending to found a colony overseas. It was here too that Apollo chiefly operated as a moral force in Greek life. The 3 famous maxims, or programs as the ancients called them, were carved on a column in the fore temple of Delphi at Delphi. Know thyself, nothing in excess, and go shorty, and ruin is at hand. They, or the first 2 at least, epitomised that awareness and moderation which are usually taken to have been the Greek ideal. Apollo lasted at Delphi well into the Christian era. He delivered his last oracle in the year 362 AD, to the physician of the Emperor Julian, the Byzantine ruler who tried to restore paganism after Christianity had become the official religion of the Byzantine Empire. "Tell the king," said the oracle, "that the curiously built temple has fallen to the ground, that bright Apollo no longer has a roof over his head, or prophetic laurel, or babbling spring. Yes, even the murmuring water has dried up." See also oracles. Wolf and mouse god. The primitive deity who developed, partly by assimilating some of the characteristics of an Eastern god into the glorious figure of classical Greece, was very probably a wolf god, worshipped by herdsmen for his power over wolves, which meant that he could keep wolves away from their flocks. And 8. In later times, Apollo's connection with flocks and herds was not emphasized as much as his more civilized attributes as the patron of medicine, music, and prophecy. But the persistence of dozens of cult names alluding to the more earthbound side of his character probably shows that, to humble country folk, he remained preeminently the god of the fields or of pastures. Apollo Enagrios or Nomios. Apollo was known as the god of leafage, the ripener, the nourisher, the grower of things, the protector of corn, the warder off of blight, and the averter of locusts. One of the oldest titles was Smintheus, which connected him which connected him either with the Asian town of Smith or with mice, or with both. Here, as so often, a number of concepts merged into one cult name. Mice were associated with snakes, such as the one which, according to some versions of the story, Apollo destroyed at Delphi. They were also destroyers of the crops Apollo was believed to protect. Many of Apollo's higher functions arose out of these primitive agricultural ones. It is easy to see the connection between his care of flocks and his skill with the bow, which drove away predators. Just show you quickly this bust. The inspiration of ancient Greek painting, poetry, and music. Apollo was depicted as the ideal type of young, virile beauty, head of Apollo in the Rhodes Museum. Shepherds to this day are known for their singing, playing and dancing in Greece and in other Balkan countries, and Apollo's patronage of music probably has its origin in this. The shepherd, too, must be able to care for his flocks, and Apollo was not only a healer himself, both of body and soul, and a god who kept away plagues and pests, but he was the father of the god of medicine, Asclepios. The original cults which were absorbed into the worship of Apollo were as likely as not introduced into the Greek world during the period of overseas colonization which began in the 8th century BC. And from an early period, Apollo took up the role of divine founder of colonies. Intending colonizers usually consulted the oracle at Delphi, and Apollo was often accorded the honorary title of founder, in acknowledgement of the usually enigmatic advice his oracle had given. It was believed by some that he guided immigrants to their new settlements in the form of a seabird. Perhaps this is the origin of one of his more mysterious cult names, Opsophagos, fish eater. In many of his remarkably numerous love affairs, Apollo was curiously unlucky. Deceit and disdain are the constant themes of these myths, and most of Apollo's affairs had a fatal ending. One very unlucky love of Apollo's was Cassandra, daughter of King Priam of Troy. She resisted the god's advances strenuously, and he wooed her with gifts, including the power of prophecy. When Apollo saw that she would not yield to him, he could not, as a god, recall his gifts, but he turned his blessing into a curse by making sure that while Cassandra always foretold truly what would happen, none of her prophecies would ever be believed by those they most concerned, her own people, the Trojans. The ears of Midas. Although Apollo was a god of protection and patronage, he was also, like all the Greek gods, a deadly enemy on occasion. The story of Niobe, told by Homer, illustrates this side of Apollo's character. She had 7 sons and 7 daughters, and in an ill-fated moment boasted that she was superior to Leto, who had only 2 children. At this, Apollo and Artemis, yes, I was right, it is Artemis, they misspelt it in the printing. At this, Apollo and Artemis drew their bows, and Apollo slew the boys, while Artemis slew the girls. Niobe, in her grief, wept until she was turned into a pillar of stone, from which the tears still flowed as visitors to Mount Sipylon could see for themselves. In another cruel legend, Marsyas the satyr challenged Apollo to a contest on the flute. Apollo agreed on condition that whoever won might have his will with the loser. Having won by his divine skill, he flayed Marsyas alive. In another contest, this time with the god Pan, King Midas of Phrygia, who judged it, decided against Apollo. Apollo then turned Midas's ears into those of an ass, and Midas had to wear a special head covering so that only his barber knew about the ears. The barber had to tell someone, and he dug a hole in the ground and whispered the story into it. Rushes grew up on the spot and still whisper about Midas's ass's ears to this very day. True story. Apollo was adopted by the Romans as a god of healing and later as a patron of oracles and prophecy, but although his cult was developed by the Emperor Augustus, who put up a great temple to him on the Palatine Hill, the Roman Apollo was not such a vivid figure as the great Greek god. In the early centuries of our era, a number of new religions and cults imported from the East were rivals for the allegiance of the people in the Greek and Roman world. From this religious struggle, Christianity, of course, eventually emerged victorious. But Apollo, the god so widely respected and adored, was throughout these centuries a force still to be reckoned with. The early Christian fathers had to make a special effort to dislodge him from his place in the imagination and regard of the pagan masses they were trying to convert. It is possible that some of the later and more scurrilous stories put about concerning the god owed their inspiration to this Christian religious campaign. David Phillips. Further reading: Robert Graves, The Greek Myths, H.J. Rose, A Handbook of Greek Mythology, Charles Seltman, The 12 Olympians, Gods and Goddesses of Greece. Right, we'll stop there. I don't like stopping because there's only a few more entries, but I'm tired and let me just make a note that we're up to Apollonius. I'm starting to feel a bit dizzy, so it's time I went to bed. What's the time? 10:30 p.m. 10:30 p.m. on the 3rd of June 2025. Well, I don't know about you, people of Earth and all other interdimensional entities, gods and goddesses, and the good folk. But I've had a lovely day. I mean, I didn't do a lot, but I've had a good day. It was a lovely day. The sun was shining, and I felt better than I did yesterday. I was exhausted yesterday. I mean, I'm exhausted. I'm in a perpetual state of exhaustion, and I'm still fighting for my better health with the CPAP machine, and it still knocks me around a fair bit, but I persevere, keeping my contract with my psychiatrist and my urologist, who were and are convinced that it will heal me eventually. It's been it's 11 months tomorrow. It'll be 12 months on the 4th of July. But a lot of it's got to do with my own preternatural will and mind over matter, and I have noticed since I stopped taking that dreadful drug my urologist put me on thinking it might help me, made me worse, really upset my IBS, something terrible. So I've noticed the last week or so, 2 weeks, I've started to feel a bit more better, and my bladder seems to be improving. I don't know why it went so terribly bad a couple of months ago. It really spiraled under, but I seem to be evening out a bit. So maybe by the will of Hashem, the Holy One, and all manifestations, maybe CPAP's starting to work for me. I don't know. But anyway, I've been working so hard on my little projects and making my home perfect how I like it, and so naturally I'm a bit tired from that too. Anyway, I bid you all good night in Hebrew, Laila Tov, and I'll be back, no doubt, tomorrow or the day after or sometime soon to continue reading Man, Myth and Magic. Yes, we've got about a third of it to go. I said that yesterday, but we're getting there. We're ploughing ahead, people of Earth. And then I'll have to think what I'm going to read to you next. Or if I'm going to continue to read to you, maybe I should, I don't know, find something else to do. But anyway, I hope you enjoy these magical readings and about Greek mythology and fortune telling, and my occasional segues where I tell true stories about my life as I know it, as I knew it, and it's all very bizarre and absurdist and odd at times, but it is what it is, and on we go in the space-time continuum. So, good night, people of Earth. Take good care, be of good cheer, and remember, as always, my favourite motto, handed to me by Dr. Harry Smith and Professor Gordon Senator, I think was the other doctor standing there. I can still see them as clear as day in my memory, both of them smiling at me indulgently. Nil caberendum et bastardos. Never let the bastards grind you down. And that was very sage advice they gifted me back in the early 2000s when I was hanging by a thread, barely hanging on to life at all. And here I am, 25 years later, still not letting the bastards grind me down, babies. So, to you, Gordon Senator, and to Harry Smith, who was in the light, blessed be Lila Tough.